discover or when we're informed of any information that raises a possibility that any of our members have not lived up to the high standards and expectations.
4 Toronto police officers have been charged with perjury and obstruction of justice. Spreading explosively, WHO says the Zika virus is a cause for concern in Latin America.
Challenger, go with throttle up.
And the NASA Challenger disaster remembered 30 years later.
1 minute 15 seconds, velocity 2,900 feet per second, altitude 9 miles.
Hi and welcome to Humber News. I'm Jaleesa Messiah coming to you from our newsroom here at Humber College North Campus. 4 Toronto police officers have been arrested and charged with 8 counts of perjury and 9 counts of obstruction of justice. Chief Mark Saunders announced the news this morning.
We will leave no stone unturned when we discover or when we're informed of any information that raises a possibility that any of our members have not lived up to the high standards and expectations.
The charges were laid after a man was arrested for heroin possession in January 2014. The officers had testified they'd seen heroin powder on the dashboard of the man's car, so they conducted a search for more. But the charges were dismissed when the judge ruled the 4 officers made the story up. Saunders says he has put together a team of investigators to look at other cases where the 4 officers were involved. They've been suspended with pay while their case goes to court. A 69-year-old Burlington man has died after his car was crushed by a wheel that flew off a transport truck. The accident happened yesterday morning on Highway 400 near King. Ontario Provincial Police say the truck was traveling south when it lost a set of wheels. One landed in the northbound lane, smashing into the victim's car. The man was airlifted to hospital where he died of his injuries. A warning today about the explosive spread of the Zika virus. The World Health Organization met earlier today to come up with ways to contain the virus. Officials say the spread of the virus is alarming. Humber News reporter Eric Wickham has more.
The World Health Organization has taken its first steps in the fight against the spread of the Zika virus. The emergency meeting in Geneva addressed the probable global outbreak of the disease. Dr. Carissa Etienne says there should be cause for concern.
I don't want to increase your anxiety, but we do expect there to be a significant outbreak of Zika virus.
The WHO predicts 3 to 4 million people may become infected. Zika virus is transmitted by mosquitoes and has been linked to microcephaly, which can cause developmental problems in infants. Common symptoms of Zika virus are fever, rash, joint pain, and red eyes. WHO Director General Dr. Margaret Chan says that action must be taken now to help prevent the disease from spreading.
The precautionary measures, we're not going to wait until the science to tell us whether there is a link. We need to take actions now.
Cases of Zika virus have been confirmed in more than 20 countries after Argentina identified their first case of the virus today. 3 Canadians have also contracted the virus abroad. The WHO says that coordination between the organization and partnered countries will help stop the spread of the virus. There's currently no cure or vaccine available for the Zika virus. Eric Wickham, Humber News.
Overseas, Greece's Coast Guard has confirmed that 25 more migrants have died after another shipwreck sank. The bodies were recovered north of Samos, an island near the Turkish coast. 10 of them were children. Rescue teams are still searching for survivors. Meanwhile, asylum in Europe is looking less appealing for refugees. Sweden says it's preparing to reject the claim of as many as 80,000 migrants. Sweden received more than 160,000 applicants for asylum last year. Authorities say as many as half will be turned down, and half of those will be forced to leave the country.
We estimate an increase, and that's why we have to prepare our agencies, our police.
Sweden's action is part of a larger move to stop the flow of migrants in Europe. In Germany, at least 25,000 Iraqi refugees are leaving the country, unhappy with the way they are being treated. Denmark has passed a controversial law that refugees with more than $2,000 will have the surplus confiscated. Some dramatic new pictures to show you today. Coalition forces in Iraq are flexing their military muscles. The U.S.-led coalition is training Iraqi soldiers to fight the militant group ISIS in hopes of retaking more of the country.
It's how to move, how to protect, how to shoot.
The training is taking place at a base south of Baghdad. The Iraqi army is preparing to retake the city of Mosul later this year. Since the collapse of Iraq's military, the United States has spent billions of dollars in military aid and training. Today marks 30 years since the Challenger space shuttle explosion.
Main engine start. 4, 3, 2, 1, and liftoff. Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
January 28, 1986, the Challenger exploded over the Pacific Ocean shortly after launch. 6 astronauts and 1 high school teacher were killed in the disaster. The Challenger explosion is one of the worst accidents in NASA's history. The Canadian Human Rights Tribunal says the federal government has failed for years to provide the Aboriginal children. Arissel Joseph has more on the story.
Isn't that our job as adults, is to stand up for kids? Don't you think that the one thing we can get in reconciliation right is raising a generation of First Nations children that don't have to recover from their childhoods anymore?
And that's what the Canadian Rights Tribunal is referring in their new ruling on Aboriginal child welfare. They say the federal government's budget for children in First Nations communities is not sufficient. This is what an expert at Humber's Aboriginal Resource Center has to say.
I've known about the inequities of the child welfare system for generations. And I think the bigger issue is what are the services that we need immediately, that we need to look at. For example, the suicide rate.
Humber's liaison officer says that the tribunal needs to consult with children and Aboriginal elders in First Nation communities across Canada.
I think that's a long-awaited announcement. For 20 years, First Nation communities like Neskantaga First Nation has been under a boil water advisory. So students who are coming into Humber have had the luxury of having clean drinking water, but these communities haven't. I'm not sure how they're going to go about it, but I think that they should go about it with First Nation communities as a collective and the communities affected at the core of the planning process, because at different levels people need different kinds of support.
The Human Rights Tribunal says that they will move forward to amend the First Nations Child Welfare Service. If you want more information, Humber's Aboriginal Resource Center is hosting its first Indigenous Knowledge Gathering event from March 4th to the 5th at Humber's North Campus. Arissel Joseph, Humber News.
The father of an Alberta teenager is warning about e-cigarettes after one of them blew up in his son's face. Ryan Durkee has the story.
These are the shocking images of 16-year-old Ty Greer after his electronic cigarette blew up in his face, landing him in the hospital. The Alberta teen's father says his son has been treated for first and second degree burns. Joining Saskatchewan and Newfoundland and Labrador, Alberta does not have a ban in place against the sale of electronic cigarettes to minors. The teen bought an e-cigarette called Watofo Phantom, which is manufactured in China. Les Hagen, executive director of Western Canada's leading tobacco control organization, Action on Smoking and Health, says this is quite common.
You know, these products don't have standards, so people really don't know what they're getting. A lot of these are manufactured in China. The manufacturing and safety standards in China are much different than they are here in North America.
Hagen says these types of incidents are happening all around the world, although they are just now coming to light in Canada.
We've seen these kinds of incidents around the world. There have been dozens in the U.S., and I'm not surprised that we've had one here in Canada, and there's been more. Some go unreported. And this one may very well have gone unreported, if not for social media.
Even amidst all of the backlash regarding e-cigarettes, that hasn't stopped all students here at Humber College from vaping it up. Mike Johansson, a second-year electronics engineer at Humber College, says he has been using e-cigarettes for a year. Johansson suspects the teen's incident was due to a lack of knowledge about e-cigarettes and their proper use.
My guess is he wasn't using it right, or he's using a cheap one. Well, there's a couple of different standards. There's the Canadian, US, EU standard, which is using the rechargeable packs. And as long as you're using the proper battery with the system that you're using, you should have a problem. It's also about recharging it properly and just minding the tech specs on it.
Although the cold is keeping people inside, that won't necessarily stop them from using their e-cigarettes. Ryan Durgee, Humber News.
When we come back, we'll tell you what's happening in the world of sports, and Nick Westo will have your 3-day forecast.
Coming up after the break, I'll have a sneak peek at your 3-day forecast, and a heads up, you might want to carry an umbrella.
In South Africa, a baby rhinoceros was abandoned by his mother, but don't worry, he's in good hands now. Anti-poaching teams found the newborn rhino lying alone on the ground. They took him to a reserve in Cape Town, where he's now under 24-hour supervision with a caretaker dad.
He normally sticks close vicinity by you. He loves his walks, he runs up and down. He's very boisterous, playful.
At less than a month old, he drinks 3 to 4 liters of milk every morning, takes lots of walks, and enjoys mud baths and music from The Lion King. New statistics show rhino poaching in South Africa has dropped for the first time in a decade, although the illegal ivory trade is still strong. But here in this Cape Town reserve, there's still hope for the endangered species.